story tonight is about voting, the only adult endeavour that gives out stickers, which is a shame. There really should be more of them. I voted is nice, but I'd also like, I went to the dentist, or I did my taxes, or I jogged, or, full disclosure, I didn't go to the dentist, I made an appointment for the dentist, but that isn't nothing. That said, getting a sticker for voting is certainly welcome, and as we've mentioned before, if you live in Michigan, you might get a really good one this year.
12-year-old Jane Highness is the artist behind this creation. It's actually one of 9 stickers that Michigan voters will receive after casting their ballots.
I want it to be a symbol of powerfulness. I want people to be proud of it when they're voting. When they actually get the sticker, it's like, hey, I just voted. And, you know, it's pretty encouraging, I think.
Yeah, it is, and the Founding Fathers should frankly be ashamed that they didn't ensure voting came with complimentary werewolf swag. I cannot believe it took nearly 250 years for a young Michigan genius to solve that obvious flaw in our democracy. This election is inexplicably close. The average of polls in the 7 key battleground states all show the candidates within 1 or 2 points. And if you heard that and didn't shit yourself, congratulations, you just earned a sticker for that. Clearly, we don't know what's ahead on election night, though I can confidently predict a few things. First, a little khaki nerd armed with a touchscreen will inspire some of the most depraved thirst tweets the internet's ever seen. Second, regardless of the results, Nate Silver will tweet, actually, this is exactly what I said could happen, in a heated argument with a 14-year-old with a SpongeBob avatar who only tweets Nate Silver peas upside down. And finally, if Trump loses, he will not concede gracefully. He's already said he will only accept the results if it's a fair and legal and good election. And he's been laying the groundwork to cry foul if he loses.
The only thing they do well, they cheat. Their policies are no good, their government is no good, their management is no good, but they cheat like nobody can cheat. They cheat. They cheated in the last election, and they're going to cheat in this election. Look, if we can keep the cheating down to a minimum, because these people cheat. They cheat like hell. If we can keep it down to a minimum, we win easily. We have to vote, and we have to make sure that we stop them from cheating, because they cheat like dogs.
Look, I get that he's just trying to rile up his base there, but I will not sit idly by while he slanders dogs. Hey, dogs, look at me. You are beautiful, you are special, and you matter. As for cats, you don't need my validation, and you know it. Trump and his campaign have co-opted the phrase election interference to refer to pretty much anything from the multiple indictments against him to the Fed's recent decision to cut interest rates, with Trump at one point even posting election interference, never surrender, with his own mugshot. And for the record, that is a terrible mugshot. Johnny Cash, that's how you do it. Laid back cool. Frank Sinatra, my, that guy fucks. Am I right, Roland? Trump's, on the other hand, looks like the photographer asked him if he could shit from standing. The point is, we need to be ready for the possibility that the mess that happened last time could happen again, especially because Trump hasn't faced any real consequences for it. He's even bragged that he's become more popular in the wake of his indictment.
It's so crazy that my poll numbers go up. Whoever heard you get indicted for interfering with a presidential election where you have every right to do it? You get indicted and your poll numbers go up.
Yeah, it is fucking crazy. When the Watergate tapes came out, Nixon had to resign in disgrace. If that happened today, he'd probably be able to release them all as an audiobook and win a fucking Grammy. But it's more than just talk. Trump and his supporters have taken active steps to undermine the upcoming election, and given it's now just over 3 weeks away, let's talk about some of the attempts they've made to subvert this election. And we're going to focus on a few areas: the lies they've told to undermine confidence in the process, the steps they've taken to sow chaos in the voter rolls, and the groundwork they've laid to turn the post-election period into a nightmare. And let's start by briefly revisiting what happened last time, because you probably remember the biggest headlines: Trump refusing to concede, which ultimately led to January 6th. But so much other weird shit happened that you may have blocked out, like when Giuliani insisted Will Smith's late father had voted, or when the theory spread that an Italian defence contractor worked with US intelligence to rig the election, or when a group called Cyber Ninjas audited the ballots in Arizona. And as this outside observer noted, they were looking for the weirdest possible smoking gun.
There's accusations that 40,000 ballots were flown in.
To Arizona?
Into Arizona, and it was stuffed into the box, okay? And it came from the southeast part of the world, Asia, okay? And what they're doing is to find out if there's bamboo in the paper.
Yeah. cyber ninjas tried to prove foreign interference by looking for bamboo in the ballot paper, which feels like the plot of a racist, straight-to-streaming political thriller where Steven Seagal saves President James Woods from wokeness. The last election was incredibly dumb, but let's not forget, it was also incredibly stupid. And all this happened despite a joint statement from federal election infrastructure officials calling it the most secure election in American history. Now, the good news is there have been some positive developments. Since then, Congress passed this act, which, among other things, explicitly prevents a vice president from just throwing out votes they don't like, as Trump famously urged Pence to do. Also, Trump's not an incumbent this time, so he can't do things like pressure the DOJ to legitimise claims of fraud. And finally, the election deniers who ran to be the chief election officers in swing states in 2022 all lost, and that is great. Unfortunately, it is also basically the end of the good news here, because the false claims of election fraud have stuck. A poll in January found more than a third of Americans still do not accept Biden's victory as legitimate. And Trump and his allies have been ramping up their lies as Election Day approaches. And I want to focus on one in particular, the claim that a lot of non-citizens are going to be voting. That claim is nothing new for Trump or indeed for Republicans. But he's now pushing it like never before.
Right now you have illegal aliens coming into our country, many from prisons and many from mental institutions, and they want to give them votes. A lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically, and these people are trying to get them to vote. They are working full-time to sign these people, many of them murderers, to vote so they can cheat on the election.
OK, skipping the fact that this theory is caked in racism, how does it even make sense? You really think people would flee their homes, travel under dangerous conditions to enter this country just to vote? It's like assuming someone would break into a bank just so they could free the pens from their chains. Why would they do that? It's just not worth the risk. But Trump's not alone in pushing this claim. He has support from conservative think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, the same group that brought you Project 2025, which started something called the Oversight Project. This summer, they released this video, which got a lot of play in right-wing circles.
The apartment complex Elliott Norcross in Norcross, Georgia, is occupied primarily by non-citizens. We visited the complex to ask residents two questions. Are you a citizen, and are you registered to vote? Shockingly, 14% of respondents admitted to being non-citizens registered to vote.
We come from a company that is dedicated to registering Hispanic people so they can vote in upcoming elections. Are you already registered? We already voted. You already voted? Yes. Are you a citizen or?
No.
Have you already been registered or?
Yeah.
Are you a citizen or?
No.
Now, that video got boosted by Elon Musk, who called it extremely disturbing, and it went viral, despite the fact the Oversight Project itself admitted it was unable to find the people they talked to on the state voter rolls, and state investigators found no evidence that any of the 7 people on that tape had ever registered to vote. Meanwhile, one of the women featured confirmed she wasn't registered to vote and only said she was because she just wanted them to go away. And no shit, I don't care who is at the door, I don't want to talk to you. It could be me coming from the future with a dire necessary warning. I'm not listening, I'm just nodding and I'm slowly closing the door as we're talking. And yet, they claimed that if the 14% hit rate they'd found held true, statewide, it would equate to over 47,000 non-citizens registered to vote in Georgia. And look, obviously, the idea that there are thousands of non-citizens voting is ridiculous. For one thing, when Georgia looked back over 25 years of its elections, it found that of the 1,600 people who tried to register to vote and whose citizenship could not be verified, none of them had cast ballots. Plus, an analysis of the Heritage Foundation's own nationwide database of 1,500 proven instances of voter fraud found just 68 documented cases of non-citizens voting, going all the way back to the 1980s, with just 10 involving people living in the country illegally. 10 people in the last 4 decades. That is statistically nothing. More people die from hippo attacks every year. Just something fun to think about next time you're fawning over pictures of Mu Deng. She could kill you, and she would kill you, and happily. And that video isn't even the weirdest lie about non-citizens that's been passed around. Maria Bartiromo also spread this doozy.
What about all these immigrants at these DMV offices where people are going to try to go get a license? They can't get an appointment at the DMV because it's jam-packed with illegals. The person that spoke to me about this weekend, identified several places in Texas where he couldn't get in. The first one was in Weatherford. A massive line of immigrants getting licensed. They had a tent and a table outside the front door of the DMV registering them to vote. It was all, the signs were in Spanish. It was an obvious Democrat operation on this voting, he said.
OK, we'll get into why that is nonsense in a second, but I'm genuinely curious about the person who saw a massive line at the DMV and their instinct was, this must be illegals registering to vote and not the DMV functioning like it has since the dawn of time. Do they blame all common inconveniences on immigration? Oh, shit, I burned my mouth on this coffee. The illegals must be brewing it extra hot to burn our tongues into silence. And while you might instinctively know that claim is bullshit, it's even dumber than you think. As Bartiromo explained, her source was a friend of a friend's wife. Something that didn't stop her happily regurgitating it on the news. And if you like that, you can find well-sourced stories like it on Forward with your drunkest aunt, Sundays at 10 on Fox Business. Unsurprisingly, those claims were quickly debunked. For one thing, Weatherford, Texas doesn't have a DMV. And in the place that you can get a driver's licence there, the Department of Public Safety, no such tents or tables were set up outside the office all that week. And even if this had happened, which it didn't, as the local GOP chair explained, all voter registrations are uploaded to the Texas Secretary of State's database to verify applicants' eligibility to vote, including citizenship. And not only had there been no recent instances of ineligible individuals attempting to register in that county, there had only been 2 in the last 15 years. And yet, just 2 days after Bartiromo spewed that on national TV, Texas AG Ken Paxton announced an investigation into reports that organisations may be illegally registering non-citizens to vote. And that is actually a bit of a pattern for Paxton. He'll loudly start voter fraud investigations, and even when they amount to nothing, he'll have created the impression something is there. In fact, the same day he announced he was looking into Bartiromo's claims, his office announced a separate investigation into allegations of election fraud and vote harvesting targeting members of LULAC, the nation's oldest and largest Latino civil rights organisation. And some of its members, like this woman, were even subjects of an early morning raid.
They scared the hell out of me.
87-year-old Lydia Martinez, who says she is LULAC's longest-serving volunteer, had her home raided as part of a voter fraud investigation by the Texas Attorney General. Martinez says up to 8 officers showed up at her home last Tuesday morning. They took her phone, her laptop, questioned her for hours, and made her wait outside.
I said, let me get dressed. And she says, oh, go outside.
What were you wearing?
My nightgown, and I had all these policemen around me. It was embarrassing, humiliating. I was so angry. It was horrible.
It's true, they hauled an 87-year-old great-grandmother out of her home in her nightgown, which is appalling. Paxton should know, as we all do, a nightgown is one of the worst things to haul a grandma out in. Right after, well, obviously a coffin, duh, but then there's a U-Haul, an anaconda, and finally, a novelty T-shirt reading, I shaved my balls for this. I think that's the worst one. And while, thankfully, a federal judge recently shut down that investigation, saying it was unconstitutional, the fact is lies and bullshit investigations have real consequences. 51% of adults are apparently concerned about non-citizens voting in the upcoming election, including 83% of Republicans. And some aren't waiting for the Ken Paxtons of the world to take action. Which brings us to the fact there are now well-funded groups actively trying to, in their words, clean up the voter rolls. Here's the head of one of them, the Election Integrity Network, explaining the general idea.
I realized that we needed to focus on this threat of illegals voting in November, because I absolutely believe that that is how they are planning to try to steal the election this year. The only way we're going to be able to stop this is by having citizen action, looking at the DMVs, looking at the voter rolls in your county, looking at the voter rolls, watching, and basically creating a national neighborhood watch to try to find these pockets of non-citizens that are getting added to the rolls.
OK, well, first, let's agree, every Rumble show looks like a high school AV club member interviewing the assistant principal after a school-wide Heelys ban. But also, a national neighbourhood watch? It's not great the model they want to emulate is basically, what if racial profiling was someone's hobby? That woman is a Conservative activist named Cleta Mitchell, and for the past 3 years, members of her group have, among other things, been scrutinising voter rolls, looking for anyone they think shouldn't be on there. And they haven't always been shy about what they're looking for. In one Zoom session, an activist from the Detroit area suggested searching rolls for certain types of surnames, saying that, "I think it's unfortunate, but sometimes the only way you can find out is to look for ethnic names." And thank goodness they prefaced that with, "I think it's unfortunate." For a minute there, I thought that instruction to do racism was coming from a bad person. But it doesn't stop there. Groups like Mitchell's are now working with computer programs like these that automate the process of finding voters to challenge. For instance, this one trawls through everything from public voter registration data to business records to change of address databases to obituaries to find people to challenge because they may have died, moved, or be otherwise ineligible. Users can then make potentially thousands of challenges to voter eligibility with just a few clicks and send them to local election officials. And while they often claim that they're helping election boards do their jobs, officials will tell you being on the receiving end of an avalanche of challenges is exhausting, especially as they're usually just replicating work that's already happening.
There have been days where I've received a couple of thousand names. I've had to look each of those voters up one by one. Roughly 75 to 80% of the names they give me, we have already dealt with.
And the rest of the names?
Well, you would catch them anyway. There's safeguards built into the whole system for any issue you can dream of.
Exactly. They're basically just creating busy work for that man who, frankly, does not need that. He works in a giant warehouse full of suitcases that gets so little natural light, the only place he can go on vacation is on his shirt. That man needs a beach, a Mai Tai, and for all the vigilante vote police to leave him the fuck alone. Most of these citizen-led challenges are either redundant, like he just said, or flawed, because they're completely reliant on public databases that may contain errors without having access to the protected personal information available to election officials. That is why programs like these can often generate false positives, like, for instance, flagging voters who share the same name and birth date but are actually different people. And getting flagged can be intensely frustrating. Just listen to this man, who lives in the same county where our exhausted official works.
I have been voting here for 2 decades. As we can see, I am real, I am here, I am talking to you.
If you're wondering why Daniel Moss is defending his existence, it's because of this list.
That's my first name, and that's my last name.
Of thousands of voter registrations in Denton County being challenged as ineligible.
Finding out that I'm on some sort of hit list of people who shouldn't be voting. I was pretty pissed off.
Daniel Moss's challenge came from someone he doesn't even know.
I want to say it was Nancy.
Nancy lives in the same county and single-handedly sent in thousands of challenges this year.
Nancy sends me something every day.
I bet she does. You can hear the exhaustion in his voice there. Nancy sends me something every day. And she'll keep sending me things until I'm a husk of the husk I am now. And a gentle breeze carries me away to some beautiful place where there are no more Nancys. The point is, just a handful of people can cause a huge amount of problems. Last year in Waterford, Michigan, a county clerk improperly cut more than 1,000 voters from their rolls in response to challenges from one 79-year-old resident who believed the last election was stolen. And challenges have been particularly intense in the swing state of Georgia, where, because of a new state law there, anyone can now bring an unlimited number of challenges against anyone in their county, which then have to be heard within 10 business days. Since that bill was passed, more than 180,000 citizen challenges have been filed, with the vast majority by just 6 people, which is ridiculous. A group sowing that much chaos should not be able to fit inside the Titan submersible. Although, since they can, I'd actually be happy to pay for their trip. I hear it's beautiful down there, guys. Georgia voters have been challenged for stupid reasons like tiny mismatches between their mailing address and where they're registered. This man showed up at a meeting last spring after he was challenged because his address was mistakenly recorded as North Pine Drive Drive instead of just North Pine Drive. And this woman had an even more infuriating story.
My rights was challenged. I've been saying at the same address since 2011.
Voters like LaKendra Graham. She says she lived on Confederate Avenue in Atlanta, the name of which the city changed with great fanfare to United Avenue in 2019. Not her fault, she told the board in March.
It's a waste of my time because I'm here when I have other things to do. I have a job.
Yeah, that's a total waste of her time, which could, frankly, be better spent on working or shopping or figuring out why the fuck that street name wasn't changed any earlier than 2019. And while the vast majority of these challenges fail, they can have a chilling effect. In the words of one attorney, they're more likely to disenfranchise or intimidate or confuse voters than they are to actually turn up people ineligible to vote, which is both infuriating and, one might suspect, kind of the point here. And while so far we've been looking at preemptive strikes ahead of the election, there's one final strand of fuckery I want to mention, whose main effects will only be seen in the days following November 5th, and that is some of the changes made to boards that certify elections. Because what I mentioned earlier, that deniers who ran for chief election officer in swing states lost, there are still significant numbers of them on the state and local level. One analysis found that in these 6 key swing states, there are nearly 70 pro-Trump election conspiracies who are currently working as county election officials. And maybe the most striking shift has been in Georgia, where, uniquely among swing states, Republicans are in charge of the governorship, the House, and the Senate. And they have used that power decisively to, among other things, reshape the 5-member state elections board. These 3 Trump-friendly members have now been installed, all of whom have questioned the results of the 2020 election. And Trump loves them so much, he even called them out by name at a rally.
3 members, Janice Johnson, Rick Jeffries, and Janelle King. 3 people are all pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory. They're fighting. Are they here? Where are they? Where are they? Where are they? Thank you. What a job. Thank you.
Wow, the fact that Trump is shouting them out like they're each the birthday boy or girl at Chuck E. Cheese is not a great sign. Nor is it great that one of them, Rick Jeffries, even told a Trump campaign advisor that if they win in November, he wants to join their administration, saying, if you all can't figure out who you want to be the EPA director for the Southeast, I'd like to have it. Which might be the first time I've heard of political corruption having a vibe that screams, no worries if not. Now, I have to tell you, all 3 have pushed back on the insinuation that they're working for Trump, with one saying she's faced character assassination, media murder, and lawfare lynching. And to get ahead of your question, yes, it was the old white lady who said that. But in August and September, incredibly late in this election cycle, the board passed a bunch of new rules that will make it much easier to sow doubt in the certification process. One of them requires a full hand count of ballots in each precinct to take place either the night of the election or the next day, and which must be done by just 3 individuals per precinct. Which might sound reasonable to you, but as experts have explained, that has the potential to cause chaos.
I brought with me 1,872 pages of paper representing what a stack of ballots could look like on a busy counting day. And busier, larger precincts may have even more than this number. If I were to hand this stack of paper to 3 random people in this room, especially at the end of a long voting day, and ask them to arrive at the same total number, do we think that's feasible? Counting large numbers of anything one by one is an incredibly tedious process and not one humans are well equipped for. People doing a hand count are going to make mistakes, which can then be exploited to spread lies and sow further distrust in our elections and our election officials.
Yeah, of course, if you handed 3 exhausted people that stack of paper and told them to have the exact same number by morning, you're not guaranteed the same answer. At best, you get a scenario that'd give most people a panic attack and the count an instant orgasm. Dozens of election officials have said a hand count of all the ballots would be physically impossible in all but the smallest counties. But the thing is, that rule might trigger another new one that bars counties from certifying the election until officials can review an investigation of every precinct with inconsistent totals. And it gives county boards the power to exclude entire precincts from the vote totals if they think they're fraudulent, which is absolutely wild. And that might be a real problem, given some local election officials are fucking nuts. For instance, this election chair in Georgia's Spalding County tweeted just 3 days after January 6th, this mess of offensive conspiracy theories, including the hashtag Biden will never be president and Biden is a pedo. That is not somebody you want empowered to throw out votes. And on top of that, yet another new rule there empowers county election board members to conduct reasonable inquiry into allegations of voting irregularities without setting deadlines for how long they might last or, crucially, define what a reasonable inquiry even means. And that is something one of those new Trump-friendly appointees seemed weirdly unconcerned about.
Why didn't you guys define reasonable inquiry? I mean, you guys made the rule.
How best should we define reasonable? we thought that most people
I mean, I'm not
knew
on
what
the state
reasonable
election
means.
board.
No. Well, I guess I'm asking. It's more of a rhetorical
Right.
question. So, I didn't think we would have to write the definition of reasonable within the rule, but if that's the case, we'll post what the definition of reasonable means.
But they still haven't done that yet, even though early in-person voting in Georgia starts this week. And that is a problem because you do need to define the word reasonable. It's a subjective term, like funny or interesting. Those words mean something different to everyone. I personally prove that every Sunday night. I'm doing it right now. Experts say that reasonable inquiry rule could allow rogue election officials to drag inquiries past certification deadlines. And while courts are currently hearing challenges to these rules, if they allow them, one potential end result is local officials in just a handful of rural counties could exclude enough votes in Georgia to affect the outcome of the presidential race. And when you take all of this together, the lies about immigrants voting, the mass voter challenges, and the introduction of new processes to slow down and question vote counts, it seems depressingly likely we're about to see a storm of bullshit just like last time. And there are a few things that we should probably be ready for. First, unless there is an absolute landslide, we're unlikely to know the outcome of the election on November 5th. And when it comes to Georgia, if Harris wins narrowly there, we'll almost certainly see legal battles stretching into December or beyond, and which could eventually end up in front of these guys, which is obviously completely reassuring to everybody. And all the while, Trump will try and exploit any delay or uncertainty, unless, that is, he wins outright, in which case he'll suddenly insist he triumphed over a rigged system. So that is what we can expect. What can we do? Well, you can, and I hate saying this as much as you probably hate hearing it, make a plan to vote and help others do the same. Since the closer the race is, the easier it'll be for Trump to sow bullshit. You should check to make sure that your voter registration is current. You can use this website to find links to your state's voter registration verification tools. Vote early if you can, to ensure that if there's any issue with your registration, you can clear it up before Election Day. And if you vote by mail, you can find a tracking tool for your ballot at this website below. But beyond that, it is going to be vital to be resilient against the storm of toxic nonsense that Trump and his allies will try and stir up. It could go on for months and be stupider than you can even imagine right now. So stupid that someone you know, love, or are related to, and those are three very different things, might even think that there is something to it. But the key thing to remember here is that as chaotic as the last election was, in the end, our guardrails did hold. And we're going to need to make sure that they hold up again. And if we can do that, then, and only then, will we all deserve the single greatest sticker ever designed. That is our show. Thank you so much for watching. We're off next week, back October 27th. See you then. Good night. Oh, wow. Thank you. Oh, you want me to eat it in front of you?
You want me to feed it to you?